There's a moment in every person's life when they realize the world isn't what they thought it was. When the veil lifts and suddenly you see the invisible strings that move everything around you. Today, you're about to become dangerously smart. Not smart in the way schools taught you, but smart in the way that changes everything. What if I told you that the greatest minds in history weren't just intelligent, they were dangerous? Dangerous because they saw what others couldn't. Dangerous because they understood the hidden mechanics of human nature. And dangerous because once you possess this knowledge, you can never go back to being naive. 500 years ago, a man named Machiavelli sat in exile, his political career destroyed, his reputation in ruins. But in that darkness, he penned words that would echo through centuries, revealing truths so powerful they're still whispered in the corridors of power today. He understood something most people never will, that the world operates on hidden principles, and those who understand these principles hold the keys to everything. You see, conventional wisdom teaches us to be good, to be honest, to trust that doing the right thing will somehow lead to success. But Machiavelli looked deeper. He saw that power, influence, and success operate by different rules entirely. Rules that nobody talks about openly, but everyone who truly succeeds somehow knows. Think about the last time someone disappointed you. Maybe a friend who betrayed your trust, a boss who took credit for your work, or a partner who said one thing but did another. In that moment of pain, you glimpsed something real about human nature. You saw past the mask we all wear, past the stories we tell ourselves about how people should behave, and into the raw truth of how people actually are. This is where dangerous intelligence begins, in the willingness to see people as they truly are, not as we wish they were. Most people live their entire lives projecting their own goodness onto others, expecting fairness in an unfair world, trusting blindly because it feels safer than seeing clearly. But what if you could read people like books? What if you could anticipate their moves 3 steps ahead? What if you understood the real motivations behind every smile, every promise, every gesture of friendship? Machiavelli discovered that humans are fundamentally predictable. We're driven by self-interest, fear, desire for status, and the need to feel secure. Once you understand these core drives, human behavior becomes as readable as weather patterns to a meteorologist. The chaos that seems to rule human interactions suddenly reveals its underlying order. Consider how a master chess player sees the board. While amateurs focus on individual pieces, the master sees patterns, recognizes configurations, anticipates consequences several moves ahead. They understand that every move creates ripples across the entire game. This is exactly how dangerous intelligence works in life. When someone compliments you excessively, the dangerously smart person asks, what do they want? When someone creates drama or chaos around them, the dangerously smart person recognizes it as a pattern, not an accident. When someone makes promises they've broken before, the dangerously smart person believes the pattern, not the words. But here's where it gets profound. This isn't about becoming cynical or cold. It's about developing what Machiavelli called a kind of practical wisdom that allows you to navigate reality as it is, not as you wish it were. It's about protecting your energy, your trust, and your resources by understanding the game that's always being played around you. Think about the people in your life who seem to effortlessly navigate social situations, who always land on their feet, who somehow avoid the drama that consumes others. They're not necessarily smarter in the traditional sense, but they possess this dangerous intelligence. They see the currents beneath the surface. The first principle of dangerous intelligence is understanding that everyone operates from their own reality. What they tell you about their motivations is often just the story they tell themselves. Their real motivations, the ones that actually drive their behavior, usually simpler and more self-serving than the noble reasons they provide. Watch how people behave when they think no one important is watching. Watch how they treat those who can do nothing for them. Watch how they respond when their self-interest conflicts with their stated values. These moments reveal more truth than 1,000 conversations. The second principle is recognizing that most human interaction is theater. People present carefully curated versions of themselves, highlighting their virtues while hiding their flaws. The dangerously smart person learns to read between the lines, to notice what's not being said, to pay attention to actions rather than words. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of dangerous intelligence is understanding your own role in these dynamics. Machiavelli taught that we must know ourselves as clearly as we know others. What are your blind spots? What do you desperately want to believe about certain people? Where does your ego make you vulnerable to manipulation? The truth is, we're all capable of deception, manipulation, and self-serving behavior. The dangerously smart person doesn't judge this harshly. They simply accept it as part of human nature. This acceptance becomes a form of armor, protecting you from the shock and pain of betrayal, because you never fully trusted in the first place. Consider the concept of emotional intelligence, but taken to its logical extreme. Instead of just understanding emotions, you begin to see how people use emotions as tools. How anger can be performed to gain control. How vulnerability can be weaponized to extract sympathy. How charm can be deployed to disarm defenses. This doesn't mean becoming paranoid or isolated. Rather, it means developing what we might call calibrated trust. You learn to trust people exactly as much as their demonstrated behavior warrants, no more, no less. You become generous with your compassion, but careful with your vulnerability. The dangerously smart person learns to ask different questions. Instead of, "Why did they do that to me?" they ask, "What pattern of behavior does this represent?" Instead of, "How could they lie to me?" they ask, "What did they gain by telling me what I wanted to hear?" Think about how this applies to your career. The dangerously smart person doesn't just work hard and hope for recognition. They understand that perception often matters more than reality, that timing matters more than merit, that relationships often matter more than competence. They play the game while others pretend the game doesn't exist. But here's where Machiavelli's wisdom becomes truly transformational. He understood that moral idealism, while beautiful, often leads to powerlessness, and powerlessness helps no one. If you want to make a positive impact in the world, you first need to understand how the world actually works, not how you think it should work. The dangerously smart person learns to speak different languages to different people, not because they're being fake, but because they understand that communication is about the receiver, not the sender. They learn to present ideas in ways that resonate with each person's values and interests. This is where dangerous intelligence becomes almost supernatural in its effectiveness. When you truly understand what motivates someone, their fears, desires, insecurities, and aspirations, you can communicate in ways that feel almost telepathic to them. You're speaking directly to their core concerns. But with this power comes profound responsibility. The same techniques that can help you build authentic relationships and achieve meaningful goals can also be used to manipulate and exploit. The difference lies not in the techniques themselves, but in your intention and character. Machiavelli wrote about the lion and the fox. The lion represents strength and courage, while the fox represents cunning and adaptability. The dangerously smart person learns to embody both. They're strong enough to stand by their principles when it matters, and clever enough to navigate complex social and political landscapes. Consider how this applies to your relationships. The dangerously smart person doesn't just react to relationship dynamics, they understand and shape them. They recognize when someone is testing boundaries, when someone is seeking validation, when someone is projecting their own insecurities. They respond with precision rather than emotion. This level of awareness can be initially unsettling. Once you start seeing the patterns, you can't unsee them. You begin to notice how people use guilt as a control mechanism, how they create artificial urgency to pressure decisions, how they frame requests to make saying no feel selfish or unreasonable. But this awareness becomes liberation. You're no longer a victim of other people's emotional manipulations, because you see them coming from miles away. You can choose how to respond rather than simply react. You become the author of your own experience rather than just a character in other people's stories. The dangerously smart person also learns the art of strategic patience. They understand that rushing to judgment or action often reveals your hand too early. Sometimes the most powerful move is to wait, to observe, to let others reveal their true intentions through their behavior over time. Think about how this applies to decision-making. Instead of making choices based on how things appear in the moment, you learn to consider the deeper currents. What are the long-term implications? What are people's real incentives? What patterns from the past might predict future behavior? This is where dangerous intelligence becomes almost prophetic. You start anticipating problems before they occur, recognizing opportunities before they become obvious to others, and understanding the likely outcomes of various choices with startling accuracy. But perhaps the most profound aspect of this intelligence is how it changes your relationship with yourself. When you become skilled at reading others, you also become skilled at reading yourself. You recognize your own patterns, your own self-deceptions, your own hidden motivations. This self-awareness is where true transformation begins. You stop being surprised by your own reactions because you understand the deeper patterns that drive them. You become both the observer and the observed, the player and the coach, the actor and the director of your own life. Machiavelli understood that knowledge without power is often useless, but power without wisdom is dangerous. The goal isn't to become manipulative or cynical, but to become wise. Wise enough to protect yourself from those who would take advantage of your goodness. Wise enough to recognize when idealism becomes self-sabotage. The dangerously smart person learns to hold two truths simultaneously. Humans are capable of great goodness and terrible selfishness. Often within the same person, sometimes within the same day. This paradox isn't something to resolve, it's something to accept and navigate with skill. Consider how this changes your approach to conflict. Instead of getting emotionally hijacked by disagreements, you learn to see them as information. What are they really fighting for? What are they afraid of losing? What would make them feel safe enough to find common ground? This perspective transforms conflicts from battles to be won into puzzles to be solved. You become less interested in being right and more interested in being effective. You learn to disagree without being disagreeable, to stand firm without being rigid, to influence without coercing. The dangerously smart person also understands the power of perception and narrative. They know that facts alone rarely change minds' emotions, and stories do. They learn to present their ideas in ways that feel inevitable rather than imposed, natural rather than forced. But here's the beautiful paradox. The more you understand human nature, the more compassionate you can become. When you see that most harmful behavior comes from fear, insecurity, or pain, it becomes easier to respond with wisdom rather than revenge. You're not excusing the behavior, but you're understanding its source. This understanding allows you to protect yourself without becoming bitter, to be strategic without losing your humanity, to be smart without sacrificing your heart. You learn to see the wounded child behind the difficult adult, the fear behind the aggression, the insecurity behind the arrogance. The transformation isn't instant. Developing dangerous intelligence is like developing any other skill. It requires practice, patience, and the willingness to make mistakes. You'll misread situations, trust too much or too little, react emotionally when you meant to respond strategically. But each experience teaches you something valuable about the hidden patterns that govern human behavior. Each interaction becomes a laboratory for testing your understanding. Each relationship becomes an opportunity to practice this new level of awareness, and gradually, you begin to see the matrix. You recognize the scripts people follow, the roles they play, the games they're not even aware they're playing. You see how social dynamics unfold, how power flows, how influence works, how decisions really get made. This isn't about becoming cold or calculating. It's about becoming conscious. conscious of the forces that shape human behavior, including your own. Conscious of the patterns that repeat throughout history, throughout relationships, throughout life itself. The dangerously smart person learns to dance with these patterns rather than being crushed by them. They understand that resisting reality is often more painful than accepting it. They find freedom in understanding rather than comfort in illusion. But perhaps most importantly, they learn to use this intelligence in service of something greater than themselves. They become guardians of wisdom, protectors of the vulnerable, architects of positive change. They understand that true power isn't about dominating others, it's about elevating them. The greatest danger of intelligence isn't that it makes you cynical, it's that it makes you responsible. Once you see clearly, you can no longer claim ignorance. Once you understand the patterns, you become accountable for how you respond to them. As you absorb these ideas, notice what's happening inside you. Are you excited by the possibilities? Uncomfortable with the implications? Skeptical of the claims? These reactions themselves are data, revealing something about your current relationship with power, truth, and vulnerability. The journey toward dangerous intelligence isn't for everyone. It requires letting go of comfortable illusions, facing uncomfortable truths, and accepting that the world is more complex than simple moral categories suggest. But for those brave enough to see clearly, it offers something invaluable: the ability to navigate life with wisdom, purpose, and authentic power. Remember, Machiavelli didn't write to create monsters, he wrote to create realists. People who could see clearly enough to act effectively. Who could understand human nature deeply enough to work with it rather than against it. Who could be both pragmatic and principled. The choice is yours. You can return to the comfortable illusions that most people never question. Or you can step into a more complex but ultimately more powerful understanding of how life really works. You can remain innocent, or you can become dangerously smart. If this message has opened your eyes to possibilities you've never considered, if it's made you question assumptions you've never examined, if it's stirred something deep within you that recognizes these truths, then comment below. I choose to see clearly. Let this be your declaration that you're ready to embrace the responsibility that comes with real intelligence.